Tim, welcome. Thank you for joining us. You're the Chief of Police in Westminster. Tim, give us some of your background. How long have you been Chief of Police here in Westminster? Married, kids, kind of give us some of that background.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on, first of all, and hello to Harbor Church. It's a pleasure to be with you. I had an opportunity a while back to be with you as well. And my name is Tim Carlson. I've been the chief in Westminster since June of 2016. So it's been about 4 years now. I've been with the department. This is my 34th year. So I was hired as a brand new rookie cop and worked my way up to the position I'm in now. So been quite a ride, and I've seen a lot of changes in Westminster. But I'm married to my wife. We'll celebrate our 30-year anniversary this year. I have two adult sons. One's married, getting into youth ministry in California. My younger one goes to Northwest Missouri State in college. So that's kind of the Reader's Digest version of me.
There you go. That's awesome. Tim, thanks so much again for being here, Chief Carlson. What an interesting season we find ourselves in. A few things have changed since we had you here from the stage. Maybe just walk us backwards. When you, in your role as Chief of Police, when did it start? When did you start getting memos and briefings that, boy, something was happening here?
Right. Well, that's a really interesting question, because much like the rest of the community and the rest of the nation, we kind of saw this thing develop overseas and saw how it might progress, and nobody was real sure. And then it kind of came to our country, and there was a few cases here and there, and everybody was just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, that is what it is. Yeah, we got to pay attention. But really, it wasn't. It really wasn't until the 1st of March, much like the rest of the community, where we started to see it in this state, and we started to realize, hey, this is a big deal. Started seeing some projections just the same way you did. We didn't have any, super behind the scenes insight or intel on any of it. And we started to pay real close attention and trying to figure out, hey, if some of these models take place, what is that going to mean for us and our community? So our timeline was really a lot similar to what the public's timeline was. And then we started ramping up some very, very serious planning early in March.
Okay. So what did that, we've got some friends of ours, several folks here connected with Harbor Church are teachers. I know I've got some friends of mine actually in Arvada High School. You had teachers on a Thursday night, is kind of my information, that got the indication, hey, we're probably going to go to online. And then by that next week, they were online. So things happened pretty quick. What were some of the things that were implemented pretty quick through your department that you saw?
Well, I think some of the things we saw is we had to react to some of those things that were happening in the community. The schools closing. Well, what does that mean for us? Not only do we have SROs in the school, but now all these kids are at home.
So SROs, right?
Yeah,
Explain.
School resource officers.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal, right? We pull them out. But now we have families at home where they would normally go to work and their kids would go to school. So it's not only in the community, but some of our employees who are in the same boat. And so those types of things started to hit us really quickly, just like you all. And you're right, boy, it was just, things just happened all of a sudden. And then when we started assessing, again, the seriousness of this and the potential impact on health impacts, not only in the community, but on our workforce, because we can't just close our doors and say, well, we'll wait till this thing passes. I mean, we have to provide the service to the community. So we really had to sit down quite early and quite quickly, as you've mentioned. How do we separate our people while still providing the service? And who do we need in our building and who don't we? And what services do we provide that are essential? And what services can we pull back from? And all those decisions, as you just mentioned, it seemed like, looking back, those had to be made in about 1 or 2 days, is what it seemed. So yeah, it was a scramble there, much like a lot of other people faced. All of a sudden my kids are online. It's like, what, are you kidding me? We're in the same boat. It's like, we could lose 25% of our cops? Wait a minute, what? So we went through a lot of that very, very quickly.
So what were some of your again, in a very fluid circumstance. I think in everybody's industry, things change dramatically, but you needed some central points to guide you through. What were kind of your guiding points along the way that helped you make some of those decisions?
Well, we sat down as a command group. That would be myself, the 3 deputy chiefs, and we said, okay, what is our policy? What are we going to focus on? And they turned to me and they said, Chief, what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, here's what we're going to do. Number one, we're going to show high visibility in the community with uniformed police officers every day that this thing is happening, until the last person standing. That we will ensure with our community that we have uniform presence in our community. Number two, that we would maintain control in our community, that this is not a free-for-all for anybody, and that we would limit our contacts appropriately for the safety and health of our officers and our staff, while at the same time continuing to deliver service. And then we focused on issues of community impact, particularly in supply chain issues, because we didn't know. That's about the time people were hoarding toilet paper. And well, what was that going to do to grocery stores and all of that? What kind of things do we need to be prepared for? So there was 4 or 5, and then there's still, unfortunately, there's still crime that happens and there's still victims. And so my direction was we are still going to focus on crime victims and ensure that they have the absolute best service as we've done before this crisis, particularly those who experience violent crimes. So we laid 4 or 5 bullet points. And so all of our planning and everything that followed focused on those 4 or 5 main issues. So that's how we did that.
Yeah, it sounds like those were your compass points on how to adjust through that. And how have you seen your command group and everybody respond during this time?
Well, I got to tell you, I think one of the greatest principles in leadership is you surround yourself with good people and then get out of the way.
Yes.
Hopefully. Yeah. And that's really what we have here. I have people that said, and I said, here's what we're going to do. So you go figure it out. And they all rose to the occasion. And then that filtered down through the organization. And I'm very, very proud of how our people handled that.
That's great. I was talking to a friend of mine in the fire department, and he said that this was yesterday, and he said what's interesting is, the number of calls have changed, right? So some things have dropped, but he said the time on any one call for them has extended because of all the decontamination, all the extra precautions. Have you seen that from a policing standpoint?
To a degree. Of course, the fire service is a little different. A lot of their calls for service are emergency medical issues where they need to have all the right personal protective equipment. They can, kind of pick and choose how they enter and what they do, and then once they come out, how they decontaminate the things you just talked about, their equipment and all that kind of stuff. So that impacts us somewhat. We certainly have to be adequately prepared with the right personal protective equipment. We may not be in doing exactly what they're doing, but we're in that environment, so we have to protect ourselves. Our issue was, how do we make sure that our cops have that proper protective equipment in situations where there's not time to wait and prepare and address and then go in? Because there are times when you don't have a choice. I can't wait to put something on, or I can't wait for somebody else to get here with me, or I can't wait to put on some other kind of gear.
What's a specific example of that? I can see where you're going, but for those listening or watching.
Well, there's any number of them, but particularly any kind of violent crime, for instance, you can't wait. A domestic in a home where somebody's being hurt or potentially hurt, a situation like that where you don't know what you're walking into, which is what we deal with all the time, but you can't stop and wait. You just have to get there and go. And so under those circumstances, we give them, all the equipment that we carry and everything else, and they're good for normal situations. But you throw that on top of an unknown kind of virus situation, and well, there's an additional threat that you may not be able to be ready for when you go in. So there are those times that were very hard, and that was a real hard thing from my position to say, how do we make sure we can do that the best we can? And then if they go into a situation like that and they do get exposed, how do we take care of them afterwards? So those are some of the things that were a little different than the fire service to some degree.
Well, sure. And I know, man, having talked to you before, Chief, that you care very deeply for the men and women under your command, in very real way. You're shepherding them, you're leading them, and I'm sure if anything more so, you're concerned about their well-being. You're right, their safety. And
not just them, but their families as well.
Yeah.
Because there's that issue, because if you have somebody who's in a situation where they're exposed, the first question I would ask is, well, I don't want to take this home to my family. So what are you going to do for me, Chief and Department, to help me protect my family? So there's all kinds of residual effects, and so we had a scramble on a lot of different organizational issues and processes that we hadn't had before. And as you said before, we had to put those in place right now, because the next call, they could get exposed to that. So yes, I care very deeply about our folks, about their safety, their exposure, but also their family and their family's health.
Oh man, and we are thankful that you do, man. Having met you and done that, boy, anybody that spends some time with you, it comes across loud and clear that you genuinely care for those that you're leading, and I just appreciate you for doing that in our community, in my community. I've noticed, the uptick in just patrols and seeing the men and women out there patrolling. I think that's a positive thing. You can see that tangibly, that your department has leaned into that. What have been, we're about a month, right? We're right around a month ish into this. What are you seeing? How has things evolved from how policing looks to the types of calls that you're seeing?
Right. Yeah, fair question. I get that quite a bit, actually. I will say that policing, I think across the world and at any time, probably fundamentally hasn't changed that much. There's still people who victimize others in the community. Unfortunately, there's still people who selfishly behave in ways that are detrimental to our community. So that fundamental hasn't changed. However, I will tell you, and I just talked to our city council about this on Monday, our calls for service have, although the people calling in hasn't changed that dramatically, we get about 9,000 or 10,000 calls a month into our dispatch center. Those numbers haven't declined, but our crime totals have gone down. Our arrests in various places have gone down in almost every category. The question I usually get, surely there's more domestic violence, surely there's more disturbances, that kind of thing. And we have not seen a significant spike in that. It kind of comes and goes, and it's certainly out there. But we haven't seen a dramatic spike like a lot of people would have thought, at least in our community, and at least for now. That certainly could change. We've seen a dramatic increase in a lot of crimes related to theft, for instance. We have a lot of large retailers who are still open, and we've seen some increase in thefts there, so we've been working with them. Auto thefts from motor vehicles, those kind of things have inexplicably, they're more than what we've seen before. Yeah. However, talking to other chiefs and other organizations, they have seen some of those spikes in some of those violent crimes, domestic crimes. And it's very interesting to listen to hear how different communities are experiencing this. So you would think it's pretty consistent across the board, but that's not quite been my experience yet.
Well, it's interesting. My, both of us have this anecdotal experience, right? You're connecting with other chiefs, other departments. I'm connecting with other pastors, and it is interesting. People's response to this is almost that within microcultures. Not even, it's not just regional. It's different city to city. It really is a microculture and just how that's impacting. That's what I'm seeing and hearing from other friends of mine that are in different churches. It's very different in those small cultural contexts.
Yes, quite so.
Yeah. What does it look like to, we're going to be releasing now to the safer at home,
Right.
which I will say this, I'm part of the clergy call that the governor does.
Oh, good.
He does that about every 10 or, 10 to 14 days usually. And I got to say, he's been terrific. My experience and his willingness, and not only willingness, but drive to connect with the faith community has been great. And I have appreciated that we can be on a variety of places politically, but recognizing that, boy, we get through this together, right? So I just say that I've appreciated his willingness to do that. As we move from the stay at home to safer at home, what are things that maybe that concern you about that model?
Right. Well, I think, as a chief, of course, one of the things I'm always concerned about is the safety of our people and the safety of our community, right? And so I measure all those questions in that context. And of course, the added layer in this time is, what does the safety of the community mean with an additional rise in this virus in the community once some of those restrictions are lifted? And what does that impact on members of our community? What's that impact on members in our organization? So that's one that I really want to keep a very close eye on. I hope the predictive models are correct in one way, in that you can slowly get back and we won't see another spike in this. But there are some that say no matter what you do, you're going to see another spike.
Yeah.
And so that to me is a direct impact on what we do, because that impacts people in our community. It impacts families in the community. It impacts my staff, not only in the service we deliver, but maybe even in their own homes. And so that's one I need to watch. The second one, on just a real practical, common sense, honest answer, I hope people don't think it's time to have one big party,
Yeah, right.
Go out and do this stuff, because it's not time for that.
No.
I know everybody wants to do that. So I hope our community recognizes that, and and just go with it, go with that kind of slow progress in trying to get back to some semblance of normalcy.
No, man, all those are entirely fair concerns. What have you seen? And thanks for sharing about the community, what you're seeing there. But I want to go back to kind of those officers that you oversee. What has been the emotional burden, the emotional strain that you've seen on your officers?
Yeah, and I appreciate that question. When this thing first started, and I had addressed our city manager's office and our city council early on, that was a similar question that I was asked from them. And my answer to them is equally valid now as it was then, is that I got to tell you, the cops are the calmest people on the planet. I mean, they get it. First of all, their job, they already take risks, and they know that. Their families know that. And to them, this is one more risk. So it's like, okay, well, what do we have to do to make sure, and what's the department doing to help us make sure that we're safe? And we've had a robust way of doing that for them, and I think they see it, which helps them understand that they can still go out and do their job. We talked a lot about their safety and the safety of their families, and because of that, I think they're like, okay, hey, I'm good, we'll go, let's get it done. So I'm really impressed with that attitude. Now there may be some that are a little bit more tense about this than others.
Sure.
Cops are pretty good about not showing that, however. But I've been very impressed, and even as this thing has grown and expanded and gotten to the point we're at now, I still really get that same sense from our people, that they're dedicated to their job, to their community. They just want to be safe, and they want their families to be safe. So.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's good to hear about those folks. Speak to me for a minute. I'm connected pretty closely with several folks in the small business community, and I know there's been some concern and questions for a lot of them. Even in the complex that we're a part of, you've got doors are closed, speak to what does it look like to help to provide a layer of security for folks that you're no longer there. I wonder if breaking and entering has increased. I know some of the small businesses are like, well, I'm staying home, but it's still my store.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we started with those kind of overarching themes that we were going to address, and as we kind of went down the list, one of the things that we are putting in front of our cops regularly is the fact that you just mentioned. Hey, there's a lot of businesses out there that are still businesses, but their doors are closed 24/7. We have an obligation.
And criminals know that, right?
They absolutely know that.
Yeah.
So we have an obligation through that high visibility, through being in those places repeatedly on an irregular basis so nobody can time things out. We have a responsibility for those business owners as well. So we've emphasized that. And what I will tell you, in tracking, some of our crime trends, that we have not seen a spike in burglaries being either residential or business. Now, there are other communities that have seen that. I don't know what the answer is. I guess maybe because we have great cops. I don't know.
I will assume that's true. How about that?
But we have not seen a spike like that. It comes and goes. There's, but other communities have seen a dramatic spike that way. So we need to be careful, and we need to not be naive to think that we or businesses in our community couldn't be victims of that. And so we do. We pay attention to that, and that is an expectation we have of our people.
Yeah, that's good. I appreciate you being proactive and thinking about that and bringing that to mind. I know that's a layer of peace of mind, for that employer that, boy, the only worse than now is if, right, they get robbed. The only way to make it worse is if somebody vandalizes their shop. It's bad enough for all of these small businesses. And so to know that you guys are aware of that and that that's on your radar, I appreciate that. Chief, what would you want folks, again, we have a variety of people that watch. We have people here locally from a lot of different communities, but what would you say, man, you want people to know? If you could just kind of talk to the hundreds of folks out there, dialing in to go, what do you want them to hear from a local police officer?
I guess what I would tell them is, we're here and we're here for you. We will continue to be here for you. And I will speak for other departments and other chiefs and other organizations who are absolutely committed to that as well. That we care about what happens in our community, and that we will out till we have one uniform left standing. We're going to be in our community. We're going to be delivering service. We want you to call us if you need us. We want you to follow the guidelines that have been put in place through executive orders and public health orders. That's how you can support us. That's really important. As annoying and as frustrating and as restrictive as some of those things are, that's how you can help us. But I'm telling you, we're not going anywhere. We're in the community. We're going to stay in the community. We're going to keep delivering service. We love our community members. And I guess that's the message that I would deliver to all you folks.
And I really, that's well said, Chief. Thank you for saying that. I certainly support all that, man. So thankful for you and for the many men and women. We've got friends, folks who are represented here at Harbor Church. They're part of Harbor Church. They're part of Police Department. They're here in Westminster, in Arvada, and Broomfield, and in those areas. And even for those of us that are tuning in from other regions, other areas, other states, man, I can tell you, vast, right? Not everybody's amazing, but boy, as a general rule, man, cops are there. They're there out of choice, and they're serving, right? They're sacrificing. They're there for you. They want to work with you.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is true. Nobody's out against, as a general rule, man, that's just not true.
No.
Nope. No. Those are isolated incidents, if there are those, but generally speaking, man, I know my experience, and certainly yours, Chief, man, they're there because they want to serve their communities.
It's absolutely true. And you know what? We're human. We make mistakes. Some people do really dumb things, even in my profession. And there's accountability. I can speak for my organization. There's accountability for those things, proper accountability. But there's going to be times when either somebody makes a mistake or there's a misunderstanding about why we did what we did or how we did what we did. I hope we're transparent enough that people can ask those questions, and that we certainly are transparent enough to tell them. But yeah, cops are human. They get frustrated, they get tired, they have things happen to them that don't make sense. Some of them do dumb things on occasion, good people that sometimes make mistakes.
I've made 2 or 3.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, if it's only 2 or 3, you're way ahead of me.
Just those 2 or 3. That's right.
Yeah. But you know what? There is still that level of accountability, not only internally in the organization, but accountability to the community. You should hold us accountable. That should be an expectation that community members have of their police department and of me. You should have those expectations. And cops should be held accountable justly. I don't know if that makes, held accountable.
Yeah, no, that's well said.
Yeah. So
there's a process. That process is in place, and we should honor that process when there is a situation like that. I appreciate that. I want to go back. You mentioned one of the things we can do to support you is just follow the recommendations, right? Follow the guidelines that are put out. I mentioned I'm on this clergy call with the governor, and it's interesting. We've had this happen a few calls now, and these are hundreds of clergy that are on this call, right? But there is and the governor has done a fine job of communicating. People are like, okay, how many people can gather? What can we do? And he said, guys, here's the thing. We're not trying to stretch and find a loophole. Please don't look at the guidelines as an opportunity to look for a loophole to work around them. And I think that was well said. He mentioned that again this last week. I think that's well said, right? That doesn't really help anybody if we do that thing. Speak to, though, Chief, if you would, what are other tangible, certainly we want to follow the guidelines. Those are worth putting out there, right? We want to do that. But what are other things we can do to tangibly support your police and whatever community the folks that are listening to this find themselves?
Right. Well, the first and foremost is just what I just mentioned is following those restrictions that are there, helping us maintain control and order in the community and limit the spread of this nasty virus. And then I think the other thing is, and we touched on it just a second ago, but I think a level of understanding that the cops are out there doing things in situations where other people are asked not to be out, and just a level of understanding of where they're coming from, and that's very helpful. What has also been encouraging, no matter who you are listening today or where you're at, we've gotten so many kind donations to our police department, and letters of encouragement and Facebook posts, and we share a lot of those with our folks to let them know that the community supports them and what they're doing. Those things, they go a long way. Sometimes donations, check first, because sometimes that's not what we need. Big hearts, but it's not what we need right now. But anything that you can do to kind of express that thanks to the cops, that goes a long way, and they really appreciate it. So yeah, I think those are the things that'll help us all kind of get through this. And I will, if you allow me, Joel, if I could, getting back to your statement of how you've interacted with the governor as a faith group, that I've been really encouraged by. As a chief of police, we're asking all the organizations in our city to abide by these guidelines. And it's been really encouraging to me to find the churches that say, you know what, we're going to stand up and be an example. We're not looking for an exception.
Yeah.
We're standing up and being an example. Now, there are times, obviously, when the church needs to say, wait a minute, we need to take a stand. I get that. But under these circumstances, that's been really encouraging for me. And a lot of our local churches have said, you know what, yeah, we could probably gather here and do this, but we're going to be the example, and we're going to continue to do online. We're going to continue to do those things. That's really helpful for us. Because if we have to go to that kind of gathering, now we're going to a church gathering, and we may have to break it up or get involved, and people are complaining because they see this, and we're in the middle. That's really hard.
Oh, man.
I really appreciate that churches are standing up and saying, we're going to be the example.
No, and I appreciate that. I appreciate you mentioning that, Chief. I've been talking to some other friends of mine, and there are internal conversations that churches are having. I had a friend of mine, he's a pastor. He said, at what point, are they infringing, right, on amendment rights and all of those things? And those are good questions. I can just say this, for anybody that's listening to this, I'll share kind of my perspective as another pastor. The state has not in any way told me what I can share, how I can speak of the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's not told me who I can worship, and it's not told me once where I can put my money in that. And if anything, our reach has gone further and beyond what it was before, because we've had to move to this online experience. I know other churches, you have to make that decision, and there may be a place and a time. Yeah. And luckily, we live in a community and in a country where there is reasonable opportunities to just disagree and to do that. And I get that. But boy, I say right now, man, I can preach, I can teach God's word, I can connect people to the mission of Jesus Christ in my community, and we can meet tangible needs, and that hasn't stopped. Right. We said this early on. The church is never closed, and the gospel is not quarantined. Right. It just looks different. And not unlike, I'm betting Chief Carlson there, that right, the police looks a little different, but it's still the police.
Yes, that's exactly right.
So I just appreciate that. As we wrap this up, again, I want to say thank you so much for all you do. You and just your representative of a lot of other chiefs around the country, around our region here in the Rocky Mountain region. It is a complicated situation.
Yes, it is.
It's multifaceted. If there's one thing the one thing I'll say politically, whether you're on the left or the right, both sides are oversimplifying it. Yeah. And it is more complicated, and it's difficult. We need to pray for our leaders, right? We need to pray for them, that they would have amazing wisdom, because this is a complicated issue, no matter where you land on the political spectrum.
Yes.
Chief, how could we pray for you? How can we pray for you? Yeah.
Well, I think that you hit a couple things on the head. Leadership at the national, at the state, at the local levels all need that kind of wisdom that you're talking about, and that would be a prayerful objective that your community could do for us, regardless, as you said, of the political spectrum. It doesn't matter. We're in this. So let's pray for that wisdom for our leaders. That's how you could help us. In our organization, one of the things that I fear the greatest is losing one of our cops. So continue to pray for their safety, for wise decisions, and for the safety and health of their families. As I mentioned when I came and spoke at your church a while back, if the family unit is healthy, then I'm going to get everything I can out of these cops. If the family is in turmoil, or there's sickness or doubt, that's when we don't get the best out of our people. So you could pray for those things, that those family units are strong and that our people are healthy. And if you would do that for us, you would have done a great service for us.
Well, man, we will commit to that. We'll get that out to our folks. And for all of you that are either listening or watching this, just take a minute right now. Even, don't step away from your computer, whatever that looks like, and take a minute and pray for those in your community, for Chief Carlson, for himself, for his command team, that they would have overwhelming wisdom. The three things when this crisis started, even internally among our leadership team, was we wanted to be measured, reasoned, and wise. Those were our 3 compass points as we set. And so I'm just going to be praying that those would be true for you all and those that you lead as well. Chief Carlson, thank you so much for your time today. Is there any question you have for us? I don't want to limit that. Anything there?
No, I drive by all the time, and it seems like the place is going great. And you've already expressed how your outreach has continued through this new medium. And I just think it's thrilling. I love to see any business in our community thrive. I love to see churches and faith-based thrive in our community. That is so critical to who we are as a community. So I'm really happy for you, and I'm glad you were able to kind of let me know how you all are doing. But it's been great being with you again, and I hope to see you again soon.
Absolutely. When we get when it looks different than today, we can start getting together. We'll have you back in person, and we'll check in again. Thank you, Chief Carlson, and to all of these watching. Thank you for checking us out here at another episode of Harbor Talks. Chief, have a great day, and God bless. We'll be praying for you.
Thank you.